This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Samuch Dalid. All the learning has been generously sponsored as a tremendous chos for Shlema for Chadvalei Bas Saradina Mir Tashem. The learning of the entire Chabura should bring Chadvalei Bas Saradina an incredible and complete refuah Shlema. Hopefully, B'siyata Dishmaya will be able to share good news that she's home recovering very, very shortly. As well as learning Shvias Chashidu V'Zalchaim V'Davar Tamiziv V'Sarach Hashem L'Bizava Ovik V'Teli Shema Ben Chaya B'Lemihutis V'Sima Malka. As well as for Hashem Shal Yisven Your Vedish Mo V'Tilam V'Tim V'Chles V'Cham Bas Yivas Blum Bas Mindol Chaim Moshe Ben Malka V'Shavikim Shirchana V'Soich Sha'ar Chayle Yisrael. We're holding 6 lines into the wide lines on Samach Gimel Amid Beis. Just a little bit of an announcement. We're going to be getting ahead with the summer dafim. I know this is a little bit premature, but this is the Ksubis Gemaras. Mir Hashem, we're going to be recording the summer dafin earlier. So if anyone has a yard side or any other day they like to sponsor in the summer, please reach out sooner than later, so we can hopefully share this chus of Limud HaTorah with as many people as would like. So we pick it up 6 lines into the wide lines, on Samach Gimel Amid Beis. Amar Rav Asi, Ein ben David ba ad sheich lekol nesham shebeguf. That should sound familiar. That's from 2 days ago. Daf that David HaMelech Mashiach is not going to come until all the neshamas of the guf are finished. And Emor, as the pasuk says, Ki ruach milafana ya'atoif u'neshamas ani asisi. A spirit comes before me, and all the souls that I have made. This refers to that all the neshamas have to eventually be created, have to be born before Mashiach could come. And this was one of the sources that one should never abstain and never stop at whatever level possible, of course, of having children. Tanya, we learned in a brayse of Rav Eliezer Omer, if you're not oisig in Puruvun having children as if you're spilling blood, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his blood shall be shed. And of course, these are a lot of the psukim in which the large sugya of birth control and abstaining from having children are based upon. And it says afterwards, Vatem, and you, Pru, be fruitful and multiply. And this shows us, you're putting the two together, the murder, the Shvichas Damim, next to Pru, says Rav Eliezer, showing us, if you're not being Yosek Pru, then it's Kilu Shevich Damim, Rav Yaakov Aimer, Kilu Memayra Hadamos. It's as if you're minimizing the Demos, the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Shenamer Kibitzelem Eloikim, also as Adam. And then what does the Pasuk say? Vatem Pru, you should be multiple. Right after discussing the Tzelem Elokim, Ben Azai Yomer, a third shot, Kilu Shevich Damin, Umimai Demos. It's even worse. He says it's both. It's Shvichas Damin and being Ma'id the Demosh. Remember about them, Bruvu. Amru Loyle Ben Azai, they said to Ben Azai, Yesh no Dairish and no Mekayim, Veina Dairish. Some of them darshan well, but don't perform well. And some of them fulfill well, but do not darshan well. Amr, meaning, what are they asking Ben Azai? Vata, and you, no Darish vein no Mekayim. You Ben Azai are saying having children is so incredible. If you don't have one, it's Shichas Dam, and if you don't have one, it's also minimizing the Demos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But you Ben Azai are not married. Amr Lam Ben Azai responds, so what should I do? Shenafshi Chashka B'Tayra. My soul longs, craves the Tayra. Evshel Olam Shiskayim Ha'idei Achirim. The world could exist without someone else. This is Ben Azai famously going with the Shita of Rashbi, that if one is 100% Isaac and Torah, he has completely different rules. Tani Idok learned in another braysa 3 lines from the end of the Amid. Rav Eliezer Omer Kol Mi Shein Isaac Peru Kilu Shevich Dam Shem Shevich Dam Adam V'Samach LaAtem Peru. Les Ben Azai Omer Kilu Meir Admos Ben Azai Omer Amr Ben Azai Ishnai Dosh V'Chulu. Another way of learning what we just said. Tanu Rabbanu, we learned in a braysa on the last line. O Ben Achaz Yemar Shuva Hashem Rivois Alpha Yisrael. Says the Psukim, Hashem Shabi Ben Achaz. All the myriads, the thousands of Klal Yisrael. We turn over to today's daf, what does this pasuk teach us? The Shechina doesn't come unless there's 22,000 Jews, 2,000 plus 2 myriads. If it's less than 1, you have 19,999 Yidin. This one, you could have created the 22nd thousandth child, which would have caused the Shechina to come down, and you didn't. It's as if you caused the Shechina to leave Klal Yisrael. Abba Chanan Aimer says, Abba Chanan Misham Rav Eliezer, Chayim Misa, you're Chayim Misa for not having children. Shnam Rabbanim Lo Yu Lahem, Hayu Lahem Banim Lo Yimasu. But if you already had children, then they would not have died. Causing the Shechina to leave Klal Yisrael by not having children. It should be for you and to your generations after you. When you have kids, then the Shechina Shaira. And that concludes this part of the Shir and actually the past few Shirim dealing with Puruvu. But in truth, we continue, we're not done yet, says the Mishnah. No Saisha V'Shayma Eser Shanim. Now we deal, Rachman al-Itzlan, with a horrible scenario. One who gets married and doesn't have kids for 10 years. V'lo Yalda Einoi Rasha Lavato. He's no longer allowed to stay married. He's not allowed to be Mavato Mitzvah Puruvu. He has to divorce her and find a new wife. Gersha divorces her, then he's allowed to marry another wife, even though that person has his own obligation. Muteres, she is allowed to marry another man to hopefully have children. And she has another 10 years with the second husband. And if there was a miscarriage, then you count from the time of the miscarriage. So one is allowed to stay 10 years married without kids. After that, unfortunately, he has to find, or she has to find a new husband. Tanu Rabbanan says the Gemara, you have to divorce her. You have to give her the ksuba. Why? Because maybe he was not zeicha to have kids with her. Meaning we don't know who is the issue over here. So divorce her, pay her a ksuba, and then try again. And we have a reference to this that the pasuk says, at the end of 10 years, Avram lived in Canaan. Then Avram gave another wife, and from here we see this is when Avram took Hagar. We see that after 10 years, you got to try new avenues. And says the Gemara, what does this pasuk teach us? Meaning the time that you live outside of Eretz Yisrael does not count towards the years. And that's what we see from Avram, that he only counted when he was in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, similarly, if one of them is sick, or they're in jail, that as well does not count from the fact we see you only count years in Eretz Yisrael. We see we also do not count years of sickness, etc. Why? You learn from Avram and Hagar. Why don't we learn from Yitzchak? What should we learn from Yitzchak? Yitzchak ben Arbaim Shanim Bekachtes Rivka v'Gomer. Uksev in the pasuk continues Yitzchak ben Shishim Shanim L'Tzayisam. So we see that from 40 to 60, we see there were 20 years he was childless. So why are you telling me that the amount of time you only get is 10 years to have children? We see from Yitzchak Avinu you have 20. Says the Gemara, Amar le Yitzchak akar haya. Yitzchak was sterile. Yitzchak couldn't have children. And he knew that it was his fault. Iachi, says the Gemara, 1 second. From Nami akar haya. Explains the Gemara, oh, mi baile Rav Chia barabba, Rav Chia barabba, Rav Yochanan lam nimnu shnaisav shel Yishmael. Kedei liyaches ben shnaisav shel Yaakov. In order to count the years of Yaakov Avinu, and Amar Rav Yitzchak, and continues Rav Yitzchak proving what we just said. Yitzchak Avinu Akar Hashem v'yat Yitzchak Hashem l'noichach ishto. He down the opposite his wife. El ishto lo'nemer el l'noichach. Melami, what does this teach us? Sheshneim akurim ayu, both Yitzchak and Rivka, his wife, were both unable to have children. Ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Why is it in the singular that he davened? It should have been that they davened. Explains the Gemara, Rivka, the daughter of Lavan, tefillah was not the same level of Yitzchak Avinu, and that's why it says that because of his tefillah, referring to Yitzchak Avinu's tefillah, they were answered. Amar Rav Yitzchak continues of Yitzchak, why did Hashem do this? The reason is, says the Gemara in the first wide line, Hashem loves and desires the prayers of the righteous. Of course, it's one of the big sources that when something unfortunate is happening to one, he has to go and realize that sometimes Hashem calling out, I love you, that's why I'm giving you something back, because I want you to daven. I want you to turn to me in prayer. Amr Rav Yitzchak continues the Gemara. The tefillah of tzaddikim are like a pitchfork. It turns over the grain. The tefillah of a tzaddik turns over Hashem's anger to Hashem's mercy. And Amar Rav Ami in the last line, Avraham and Sarah tumtumin ayu. They are both tumtums, as we've learned what that means. That their makom erva was covered over. Shenemar, which is can't have children. Hibitu al atzur. Look to the tzur. Look to the rock. Because we turn over to Chavdaladam and base. Look at the rock that you were cut out of. As Rashi says, and the hollow from which you were dug. The pit. Look at Avraham and to Sarah who gave birth to you. And the second pasuk explains to us that they were cut out, they were hollowed, referring to the fact that was the reason they could not have children. And continues the Gemara, Sari Minu, the islandess, which we've learned means she's a woman that cannot have children. Shnamar bati Sarah Akara in love blood. She can have children. Afilu Bais Velad in law. This is part of the incredible. Not only could she not have children, she had no uterus. There was a physical impossibility. Her body was incapable. Not just that she couldn't have children, she didn't have the uterus, and that was actually created. We see the power of tefillah, that itself, the part of a body, could be created through tefillah. Now we go back to the din of the Mishnah. 6 lines down, the Mishnah began by teaching us that how many years can once they marry without children? We said 10. The 10-year period was back Bisman of the Rishainim, back Bisman of the Avos. They lived for 180, 200 years, etc. In our days, no one lives more than 70, 80, 100, 110 years. 2.5 years. That's how long one can stay married without any children before he has to get divorced. The equivalent of 3 pregnancies, 9 times 3. Plus 3 months is 2.5 years. No, 3 years. You have to have 3 remembrances, 3 Rosh Hashanahs. Why Rosh Hashanahs? You have to go through 3 times. The potential Hashem can answer you on the day of remembering for children of Rosh Hashanah, in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers Sarah, Rachel, and Chana. Amar Rabba says, I don't know what you're talking about. You're telling me that only back then it was 10 years, and nowadays it's 2.5 years, 3 years. Says Rabbi, what are you talking about? Mechti, let's understand. Masnisan Mantakin. Who wrote the Mishnayis? The Mishnayis that said 10 years. Where did that come from in the first white line? Rebbe. Fabi made David Imichani. It says the Gemara, Rebbe was afterwards. Rebbe is in times of Rebbe, in the times of the Mishnayis. No one lived more than 80, 100, 110 years. In the times of David HaMelech, the years already were reduced. So says the Gemara, the rules of the Mishnah stand, and of course we'll mention that in the days of modern science, there are completely different rules. Often we can know the issue, often there are many more things that could be done, and this is also one of the sources that people bring. Now, nowadays, one does not have to wait, before going. Used to be, they would say one has to wait 5 years, etc., before going for infertility treatments, but nowadays you could figure out the issues much quicker, and obviously that's a large discussion, not for now. Says the Gemara, going back to this din of 10 years, not having children, says the Gemara, we said that perhaps the husband did not have the schos to have children with her. Ask the Gemara, but maybe she was the one that didn't have the schos, so therefore she should not receive the ksuba. We said right when we started the Gemara that the Mishnah teaches us 10 years. After 10 years you have to get divorced. We said husband has to pay her. Why? Because maybe it's her fault, his fault. Says Gemara, wait, maybe it's her fault. Explains the Gemara, the commandment, the tzivu is not on the woman. Therefore, she does not get punished. She would not be punished whenever there's an issue with children. Explains the Gemara, it's the husband's fault. Why? Because he is the one that has the tzivu. He is the one that has the commandment. Ask the Gemara, Amy, 1 second. The Mishnah taught us marry another wife, and maybe the second wife you'll have children. Is that true? Rabbanan the Rav Ava bar Zavda Nesiv Itza V'Alibani. They told Rav Ava bar Zavda, get remarried and you'll have children. V'Amar Lahun, Rav Ava bar Zavda responds, if I would have had this chos, I would have had for the first wife, so I'm not getting remarried. So ask the Gemara, we see from Rav Ava bar Zavda, you don't have to marry a second wife. Explains the Gemara 5 lines down. Says the Gemara, Rav Ava bar Zavda was sterile, he wasn't able to have children, so you were just pushing off the Rabbanan. But in reality, anyone else could get married a second time. And why was Rav Ava bar Zavda sterile, as we've learned already? Because he sat through the long and lengthy drushes and lectures and shirim of Rav Huna, and he would hold in the ability to use the bathroom, which made him unable to have children. And continues the Gemara, similarly, 7 lines down, Rav Gidel Yaakov Berked Rav Huna, Rav Chalba Yaakov Berked Rav Huna, Rav Sheish Yaakov Berked Rav Huna, and all of these great Amarayim became sterile from sitting through the long and lengthy lectures of Rav Huna without using the bathroom. But continues the Gemara and says, Rav Achbar Yaakov Achadetei Kinsa. Rav Achbar Yaakov one time had a disease, Kinsa Taluya Bar, so they hung him from the cedar columns, the Vei Rav in the yeshiva, but nothing Minei Kawutza Yarka, and they came out of him something that was this green branch of a palm, and this was the way that he got healed, and he was able to have children. And Amar Rav Achbar Yaakov, now big discussion, is this the same Rav Achbar Yaakov that we just learned a moment ago got healed from this issue? Shitin Sabi Avina, says Rav Achbar Yaakov, we were a group of 60 Talmidim Chacham, the Kuli Yaakov Berked Rav Huna, and we all became sterile from sitting through the judges Rav Huna, Lavar Mani, except for myself. The Kaimu ben Avshai, Chachma Tichu Ba'ali, wisdom preserves the life. Some want to learn that this is going back in the previous story. Rav Achbar Yaakov saw that he was about to become sterile, and he did this thing that they hung him from the pillow, or whatever that means, and the refuah, the healing, was this green shoot that came out of him, other pshatim as well. But let's continue. Back into the Mishnah, back into the Gemara, 10 lines down at the 2 dots says, Girsha Mutaretz. If he divorces her, she's allowed to marry another man. And the second one as well, she has 10 years to have children from. Explains the Gemara the obvious implication of the Mishnah, Sheini en Shlishi loy. She could only get married twice and not 3 times. And now we'll begin a long and classical discussion of the Gemara and how many times creates a chazaka. Many people know the concept of chazaka. We always assume a chazaka is 3. Says the Gemara from our Mishnah, it seems a chazaka is 2, because she's only let him be married 2 times, and if not, she's not let him marry a 3rd husband. Explains the Gemara, Masnis and Mani, who is this opinion that says a chazaka is only 2 times? It's Rabbi. The Tani learned in a Raisa, Mila Rishain Umeis, Shani Umeis. If someone is mal, his first son, and Rachman son, he's nifter, a second son, and he's nifter, Shlishi Loi Tamil. Don't perform Mila on the 3rd son. Divrei Rabbi, because Rabbi says once 2 times it's chazaka. Don't perform Mila on the 3rd kid. Rashba Goimer, Shlishi Tamil, Revi Lai Tamil. Shemi Gamliel says no, 3 times is the chazaka. Ask the Gemara, Vatami Ilcha. It says the Gemara, we learned the opposite. Machlekes Rabbi Shemi Gamliel. We learned the opposite. Who holds 2 and who holds 3? Says the Gemara, Hey Minayu Achrinsa. Whichever one is last, which one was last, asked the Gemara. Let's figure it out. Whichever Bryce is last is going to be a raya that is indeed the correct shot, whether 2 or 3 times Rabbi or Rashbag is the psak halacha. So Tashema says the Gemara, there's a story with 4 sisters in a place called Sipari Shamalarish. I know Mace, the first sister, had a child and gave him a Mila and he died. Shnia, the second sister, had a child who made Shlishis, who made Revius, as the 4th kid was born to the 4th sister. Don't give the Mila. So says the Gemara, seemingly we have a raya. The Rav Shimon Gamliel is the one that says, what's a chazaka? 3 times. Because he told the 4th sister not to do it. Ask the Gemara, 1 second. Maybe that was just the story that the 4th one came. But Vidilma, maybe if the 3rd sister came, about 25 lines from the bottom, the first one line is Shlishis. Maybe if the 3rd sister also came, Rashbag would as well tell her not to mull the kid, not to give the kid a Mila. Explains the Gemara, but if that would have been the case, Imkei Mas, do say to Rav Chia bar Rava, what was the edus, what was the testimony of Rav Chia bar Rava coming to teach us, coming to show us? If the story wasn't precise, what was Tashma Adam Rav Chia bar Rava? Who cares? It wasn't a precise story. Says the Gemara, 1 second, Vidalma Kamashla, maybe there's a different Chiddush. I'm sure many people are wondering, this is a different case. bris. These are different sisters having kids. Until now, we learned if someone has one son, two sons, three sons. Here we have different sisters. So maybe that inherently is the chiddush, that we could create a chazaka through sisters. So we're not sure which way to learn the brisa. Amar Rava interjects Rava for a moment and says, based on what you just said, that is the concept of a chazaka by sisters. Person should not marry a girl from a family of nichbin, which is epileptics, nor mitzayroyin, a family of lepers or tsaras. When there's three times, because then it could happen, then there is a chazaka in that family. So says the Gemara, let's go back. So what's the maskana? We're trying to figure out what was the final brisa. Is Rebbe hold 2, does Rashbag hold 3? We try to bring Run Raya. The Gemara said it's not a conclusive Raya, because maybe that's just a chiddush about sisters. So what's the maskana? Says the Gemara, Ki Yasser Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef Amar Ovda Have Kamed Rav Yechanan. There's a story with Rav Yechanan Bekanishnan de Ma'oin. There was a story with Rav Yechanan with the shul in Ma'oin, Yom Kippur and Shechalias b'Shabbos. It was Yom Kippur and it was Shabbos. And what happened? The Malarish, I know Meis Shniyah Meis. Shlish is Balafan about the third kid who was about to get the Mila. Came on Yom Kippur, that was Shabbos. Amar la lechi umayli. Rav Yechanan said, go and do the bris milah. You're allowed to do it. Two kids died. Rav Yechanan said, no, it's not a chazaka. Chazaka is only with 3. Rav Yechanan, Talmud of Rav Shimon Gamliel, assumes the Gemara. So we have a raya. The Rashbag is the opinion that holds that chazaka is 3. Amar le Abaya, says Abaya, chazi de kasharta yisura v'sakanta. I see from your edis that you're allowing one to be over an iser and not be worried about the sakana. There's 2 things you're saying. Number 1, it was Yom Kippur Shabbos, and if you can't do a bris milah today, you'd be over in malacha daraisa. And number 2, it's a sakana. So said Abaya, be careful, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef. Is what you're saying accurate? And samach Allah Abaya. And when Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef obviously said, yes, I'm indeed correct in what I'm saying, the Rashbag held 3 times is a chazak, and if we're after 2 times, there's no raya. Abaya himself agreed and relied upon Abaya. Relied upon Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, excuse me. Va'azal nasva lechaima, and Abaya himself went to marry a girl named Chaima, who is Brata the Isi Braid Rav Yitzchak Braid Rav Yehuda, the daughter of Isi, the son of Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehuda. The Nisva Rachva Bombadisa Veshachiv, who had been previously married to Rachava of Pamadisa, who died. Rav Yitzchak Braid the Rabbi Rav Chana of Ishachet, and she was also married to Rav Yitzchak Bar Rav Chana, who also died. So this woman, Brata, Chaima, was already married 2 times, and her husband died twice. And Abaya came along and was her 3rd husband. Relying Vinizvahu, and Abaya married her, relying upon Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef's Eidos that Rashbag hold that was chazaka 3 times, and because there was only 2 times, Abaya went and married this woman. And what happened? Vishachiv, and Abaya Rachmana litzlan was nefter. Amar Rava, says Rava, mi ika David ofta benafshei ki I, can you potentially put your own life at danger? For Yehuda Amar, he is the one that said Avin Disamcha. Ovin's reports are reliable, but Yitzchak Somka Lav Bar Samcha, Baya himself was one that said of Yitzchak Bar Yosef never gave over that perfectly from his Rebbe. Ovin, you know why? Ovin's reports, we see the Maila right now of Chazara. Ovin's reports are reliable because Yeshna Bechazara. He always chazared over what the Rebbe said. So when he said this is what my Rebbe said, he was reliable. But Yitzchak Somcha, Einoi Bechazara. So Rabba was upset that Abaye relied upon Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef in a matter of sakana about himself. And furthermore, says the Gemara, says the Gemara, when do we see that Rabbi and Rav Shimon Gamliel argue with regard to bris milah? But do we see that they argue again with regard to marriage? Maybe not. So with regard to the second question of Rava, says the Gemara, no, they actually argue with regard to getting married. Vatani learned in a Bryce, and he says, Rishon Meis, Sheni Meis, Shlishi Loi Tinase, Divrei Rabbi, Rashbag Omer Shlishi Tinase, Ravi Loi Tinase. Now says the Gemara, why? I understand how we can have a chazaka by Mila. You have a family that the blood is thin, that the blood is thick. So it could be that there's a family that the bris milah, the blood will not coagulate, and it could cause the child to die. El nisuin my taima. What does it mean that there's a chazaka by nisuin? That this woman married A and he died, she married B and he died, now marrying C, he's going to die as well. Where do we get that from? What's causing him to die? Explains the Gemara two pshatim. Amalei Rav Mordechai Rabashi Achi Amar Avimi Marguna Mishmei Ravuna Me'ayin Gairim. It's caused from the Mayin. It's caused from the spring. It's caused from the relations. Her canal is some sort of disease which is causing the husband to die. Ravashi Amar Mazel Garam Mai Benayuk Benayut Irsis Umis. Nafkamina is going to be if they did Erisin and died. Erisin, obviously, they didn't have relations, so it can't be a physical ailment of her body. Inam, another nafkamina denafel mediklas umeis. Husband fell from a tree and died again. It was nothing to do with the relations. So the Gemara proves that not only does it deal with Mila, it also deals with marriage, and therefore Rava was upset that Abaye relied upon the Eidos of Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef and married, and that's what caused him ultimately to die. Says the Gemara, concluding this discussion, Amrli Rav Yosef Reid Rava, Le Rava Boy Minimi Rav Yosef Alacha Kerabi. They asked, is the halacha like Rabbi Varmaliin? And he responded to me, yes. But then I asked him, halacha kirashbag Varmaliin? I don't understand. Both questions, he said, yes. Is it 2 or is it 3? Is he playing games with me? Amar lei lo, he says, Rava, no, he's not playing games. Stamahi, there were 2 stamishnayis ubashelach, and both of them he said for you. And now Rava explains, Nesuenu malkis kirabi, svestais v'sharamuit kirashbag. So concludes the Gemara, we have a massive machlekes Rebbe and Shimon Gamliel. What is a chazak? Is it 2 or 3? Rebbe says 2, Rashbag says 3. What's the psak halacha? With regard to marriage and malchus, we go with Rebbe that chazaka is 2. When it comes to vestes and sharamud, we go with Rashbag that chazaka is 3. Nesuin hadamar, and that was the whole discussion today that if a woman marries 2 times already, your husband dies, it's called a chazaka, and therefore she's not allowed to marry a 3rd husband. Malchus. What is the malchus? I'll conclude with this. The case that my malchus, we see a chazaka is 2. It's not mishalak. If someone got malchus for a din, for an avera that involves creases, Vishani did the avera again, Bezdin coins Alikipa, Bezdin confines him to a jail cell, Machino says Sa'ir, and they feed him barley, I should to crease and kas till his stomach blows up and he gets a dreadful death. After getting 2 times the malchus, he has a chazaka, no longer will they give it again. We'll pick up tomorrow with the 2 cases that we're going to paskin like Rosh Shimon and Gamliel. The chazaka is 3 times by Vestais and Shar HaMuad.